How's everybody feeling at right now? This way, or this way? Okay. um, so I think we just get into it. I'll give us about a half hour, so we'll see, we'll see how the conversation goes. So does anybody have a question that they want to start off our Q&A session with? Question about anything that I said that seemed ridiculous, that's super confusing to you. Valentina. Do I have to unmute you? I think I do. Hold on.
I
Oh,
did
there you
it.
go.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Hey, I did write a question because I was really observing my inner movement. And when you said this, I got stuck, even though I thought I knew what that meant for me. But can you use a daily example? And I'm sure that could be part of your life, but can you use as an example on how I can lean against my edge when I feel I am
So what does
into
it
my
mean
edge?
to when I say to lean into it?
Yes, or I know what you mean, and I know that I'm observing something that's uncomfortable, and instead of labeling it and pushing it away, what does it look like to lean towards it and see it for what it is and open the possibility of seeing what it could do for me, how it could help me grow. So if you have an example, I think it would be useful for me and maybe for
okay.
else
So
too.
all I can ever really do is share my experience. Okay.
Sure.
So I don't know what's going to work for anybody else. I can just tell you the process that I've gone through and what's worked for me. And hopefully some of that will be helpful for you guys too. So I'll answer your question by telling you what I do. Okay. And then you can see if there's other questions that come up or clarifications about that. Okay. So when I'm talking about leaning into our experience or leaning into our edge, when we notice an edge that we have, a lot of this you'll become better at as you develop mindfulness practice. Okay. And there's lots of places that you can do that if you're sort of new to that idea or new to that skill. So with mindfulness, you basically learn to become aware without judging the experiences that you're having, to just notice them. All right. So that's where you have to start. So then what happens when you notice that you're having a challenging experience or you're bumping up against a boundary, what tends to happen habitually, which I think is, probably human nature, because human nature is to run away from things that are painful and to run towards things that feel nice. Okay. So what we tend to do is we lose a lot of opportunities by running away from things that feel uncomfortable. All right. And before I tell you this story, I want to acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of people, especially right now, that are going through super, super, super intense things. And so what I'm describing now can sometimes feel a little too intense, or people will get stuck in it. Okay. So I just want you to honor where you're at and to acknowledge your current boundaries and limitations, and just to understand that there's a way through that. And that seeking out help from people that can support you is encouraged. Okay. Because a lot of times it's helpful just to have another perspective. But for most of us, our pain is fairly manageable. And what that would look like would be this. So first of all, the simple thing is to stop denying the experiences that we're having. And I can tell you from spending a long journey through this life so far, in many different kinds of circles, one thing to be aware of is that there's sort of um, one way that this gets talked about, which is a little dysfunctional and actually not helpful, where people are just encouraged to or pretending that they're just happy all the time. And, we all are human beings. And so we all have emotions of all different varieties. And that's normal and it's natural. And so this isn't about this particular leaning into is specifically to address the fact that sometimes, especially when we feel like we want to strive towards happiness, what we do is we ignore the uncomfortable, dirty places, and we just pretend that everything's okay all the time and we're happy all the time, and we deny what we're authentically feeling, and that keeps us from healing. It keeps us stuck, actually, is what it does. It keeps us stuck because we're not moving through our experience well. So for me, what's been helpful is that when I notice that I'm having an uncomfortable experience, I just, first of all, acknowledge it. So I don't judge it. I try to not engage in negative self-talk around it. And I just notice it, and I label it. Okay. Um, I'm having an intense experience right now. Isn't that interesting? Okay. Or sometimes I'm at work and I'm just super stressed out, and I'll just say right out loud, I'll just say, wow, I am super stressed out right now. And sometimes just acknowledging that, okay, makes it okay. It's like, you know what? I'm not a bad person because I got stressed out. I'm not a bad person because I got angry. I'm not a bad person because I got irritated. Um, the important thing is what we do with those feelings. And so for me, what's helpful if I'm having repetitive, difficult emotions that are coming up. So let's say I'm in a cycle at work. That's usually my biggest testing ground, right? I see the most people right now. If I'm in a cycle where I'm repeatedly getting irritated, okay, or I'm repeatedly getting impatient, or I'm repeatedly getting angry, I'll, instead of ignoring that, okay, I'll either in the moment or later try to lean into it. And what that looks like is for me to say, you know, um, I'm experiencing a lot of um, irritation right now. Okay, we'll use that as an example. I'm experiencing a lot of irritation. And the one thing that you'll notice that I didn't say is I am irritated. Okay, I am angry. I am sad. Because what does that do? That's a story. Okay, I am not angry. I am just having an experience of anger. That's very different than being angry. Okay. I'm having an experience of anger. What does that feel like? What do I notice about that in the body? Okay. And what that does for me is instead of pushing it away, it allows me to lean into the experience and look at it. Okay. Look at it. And it gives me an opportunity to exercise my non judgmental awareness, to accept the feeling that I'm having. Wow, that's there. Where did that come from? And a lot of times, especially for those of us that have been doing a lot of growth, right? A lot of um, practices, and we've come a long way. Sometimes things will come back up for us that we thought we were done with. All right, that happens for me from time to time, and then I'll just say, "Wow, you know, um, this is here. I accept it. Okay, I don't decide that I shouldn't be feeling that way, and I allow myself to experience the experience of being irritated, okay, without grabbing onto it. And a lot of times, what that does is it just allows that to move through. And, everybody kind of conceptually engages with their world and their internal environment in a different way. I happen to be very, um, like my experiences tend to be very subtle. Okay. And I'm very sensitive to like feelings in my body and all of that. Whereas Dan, for example, really doesn't experience things the same way. So you'll have to sort of adopt this to what makes sense for you. But what you want to do basically is just to notice what your experience is and allow it to progress. Okay. Does that make sense? So by leaning into it and allowing and accepting it, you allow it to just move through you. Okay. Rather than trying to squelch it or stomp it down or push it away. When you lean into it, you're just moving into the experience so that it can do its work on you and just move through it. And for me, because of the way that I experience things, it's helpful for me to, if I start getting into a big story around it, to what I've decided as a helpful replacement story for me is just to notice it's just energy. Okay. It's just a sensation. So, what does the sensation feel like in my body and how does it move? Because then my mind doesn't attach to it and it allows me to separate the story from the experience. And for me, that lets it move through. Now, if you're asking, what does that look like when you're coming up against an obstacle? Okay. Which might be, I mean, what would be an example? Like a pattern that you have, let's say. I mean, I can't think of a pattern right now. Somebody can give me an example if they want, but, do you have an example, Valentina? I don't know. So, I mean, it would just be a repeated experience that comes up for you over and over and over again that you tell yourself things like, I can't get past this. Okay. Like this always happens to me. Like when we start going into those kinds of stories, that's a cue that we've bumped up against one of our boundaries. And usually that means that we either have limiting beliefs around that, okay, or we have unhealed trauma sometimes, traumas that we're carrying. I remember, and sometimes they're unconscious, like you have no idea. And as you become more aware of what you're experiencing, those will begin to loosen up for you. So for example, years and years ago now, I mean, probably 10 years ago, I remember I had an experience. Dan used to say this particular thing to me, which to him didn't seem like a big deal, but it triggered me every single time. Like I would get so inflamed every time that he would say it. And it was really irrational. Like my response to it was totally irrational. And I remember one day I just had this aha moment, and so that would be like a wall. Okay. Like I don't know how to have a different reaction. Like every time this thing happens, I react. I'm not responding, I'm reacting. Okay. That's usually a signal that there's there's something there to look at. Okay. And that's why I'm saying that's how we heal ourselves. That's how we allow life to move through us is if we hit those walls, if we just allow ourselves to look at that and say, what's here for me in this experience? This is what I mean by leaning into it. Okay. So instead of just going like, oh, I have a problem and I never deal with that right, and I'm just going to try to not think that way, that doesn't usually really work. When I say to lean into it, what I mean is to look at it. Okay. To allow yourself to be present with it and to be curious. So, where is this coming from? Have I heard this story before? Okay, whatever story is running in your mind about the experience. Okay, have I heard this story before? Why is this here for me? What is it showing me? And how can I grow? Like, this is here to show me something. It's an opportunity for me to overcome an obstacle and continue on my path of becoming. And so for me in that process, the example of what happened was this: I have a reaction, I have a reaction, I have a reaction. I look at that over and over and over again. And then one day I realize the story that's running in my head every time I hear that. And it's this story: you're never good enough. You're never good enough. This is the story I'm telling myself. This is not what Dan says to me. Okay. This is an internal story that I have, that I lay on top of what's said to me. Okay. So he says something that to him doesn't seem like a big deal. And this is my reaction: I'm never good enough. I'm never good enough. And he doesn't think I'm never good enough. I think I'm never good enough. Okay. So then this aha moment happens where I say, oh my gosh, where is this story coming from? Where is this story coming from? Where have I heard this before? Okay. What's the root of the story? And then I can follow it back to my childhood, right? And I realized that I've been carrying this story subconsciously with me my whole entire life. And because it was in the dark, okay, I didn't realize that it was there, but it was clearly causing me to react to the world. I was pushing against the world. It was very painful when I felt that way, right? How does it feel to feel like you're never good enough? So for me, I just leaned into that. And then I really broke that down and I said, is it really true that I'm never good enough? Where did this story come from? How did it get in there? Okay. And then what you do is you take that story and you argue in your own defense. Okay. So in what ways do I have proof that that story isn't true? Okay. And that helps you to rewrite the story, but you really have to lean into the uncomfortableness of it for a little while in order to, investigate where those stories are, why you're holding them, how they got there, what's feeding that story. Okay. Because then a lot of times there are other stories that are branches off of that story. So the mind is a very interesting place. So you can go down a lot of avenues with it. And then, an interesting thing happens is when you become aware of it, it doesn't have the same hold over you. Okay. So then what happened, and again, I'm a process, life is a process, I'm a human being, is that I become aware of the story. So the next time Dan says something and I get triggered and I go, "Arr!" and the story comes, I'm never good enough. And then I go, I caught you. I catch the story. Okay. And I go, that's not what he's saying. That's not true. I'm a good person. You replace the story and then it loosens its hold on you because you've brought it to light. Okay. This is exactly what that poem is talking about in a sense when we say the wound is where the light comes in. Okay. When we look at that, we're able to bring light to our awareness. And then we're able to heal that, or we're able to let that go. And then it doesn't have a hold on us anymore. So it might still be running in the background. Okay. The mind is a well-programmed machine, and we have to go through a process of reprogramming it. Okay. These are all programs that are running. That's where they're coming from. They're in our subconscious, running and running and running. So it's just about being aware of the programming and then reprogramming our mind, okay, to have the stories that that are helping us. Okay. So thanks. Anybody
Thank
have
you.
questions about that or different unrelated questions? Go ahead, Marcy.
Well, that's interesting because I've had that dynamic with my partner that they have something that triggers me, and I need to become aware of what stories behind that, like I'm not good enough, and but yet there is something that's happening in their field that is more about them. I've kind of gotten to that understanding that my partner has certain anxiety about accomplishing things and a certain impatience that goes with that. And then I take that in as like, I'm not good enough because I'm not working hard enough toward her goals. what about
Mhm.
my own goals? Or, where's that conflict? So I guess I'm relating to your story. And then
Mhm.
also maybe, how do you not let the other person's field,
Mhm.
affect you? And I guess that's has to do with
Mhm. Mhm.
boundaries, something about boundaries. Maybe
Yeah.
you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are all really good points. There's so many nuances to our, you know, how we're interacting with each other in this ground, right? In this ground of consciousness that we have. So, the first thing that I'll offer for you to consider would be how this idea sort of plays into or might be helpful with those kinds of dynamics. Because we see this anytime we're interacting with anybody, this is relevant. Um, when we talk about acceptance, one of the reasons that it's so important to our wellness, our mental wellness, our emotional wellness, to work on our self acceptance and accepting how I am, is that when you can better accept you, okay, I can accept me and all of my experiences and all of my processes that I'm going through, okay, we're then able to allow other people to go through their process and to accept that they are going through their own process and to let go of trying to manipulate or control their process. Okay. So that's one thing that can be helpful, is just to sort of understand that when we talk about acceptance of our reality, acceptance of the experiences that are in front of us, it's not only accepting our internal experience, but it's also accepting, what's going on in the world. It doesn't mean we have to like it. Okay. It doesn't mean that we have to approve of it, but it's just more like this. It's like this now. Okay, so you don't make a big story around how things are, like it shouldn't be like this, or that is wrong, or, those kind of stories that we make. We just say, this is how it is now. Doesn't mean like it'll be like this forever, but this is what's here for me now. What can I do with that? And then we allow other people to have their process as we go through our process. And then what that does is it also puts us in a place of empowered, it puts us in an empowered position, because once we have acknowledged my process and your process, then we can take an appropriate action to contribute to the kind of experience that we want to be seeing happening in relationships, in the world. And that's a whole other topic that we don't really have time for today, about, mm, you know, how we interact with things and what's helpful to create goodness in the world for each other. The process that I walked you through earlier, the meditation, where you settle at the heart, okay, was interestingly helpful for me in interacting with other people, because I tend to be fairly like, I have to be very mindful of getting pulled around. Okay. And I had figured out some things that worked for me. It took me quite a long time, but when I went to this workshop and we did this ground of consciousness exercise, one of the things that she had us do was exactly what I walked you through, where you settle your awareness in the back plane of your body at your heart, and then you become aware of the field of consciousness that you are within. Okay, and that what's around you. You become aware of other people. Okay, I was in a group in a workshop, and then she had you open your eyes. Okay, and just watch and notice what it feels like to look at the world around you with your mind here. Okay. Now, I've heard other practices, shamanic practices, where they do the same thing, but you're like looking from your third eye kind of a thing. Okay. This particular one that I was taught was this way. And again, this is with Judith Blackstone, if you want to explore it a little bit further. And then what we would do is we would practice staying in that space. okay, staying internal and talking with somebody. So we had partners and you would talk with them. And it was really interesting to notice what happens when we start to engage with other people, when you're in a subtle space. Now we're talking really like energetic interactions here, right? What you notice happens is this: what we tend to do when we talk to somebody is we take ourselves and we go towards them. Okay. And Judith is such an interesting individual because she can see when people are doing that. And she would walk around and she'd be like, get back, you know? But it's a practice. So what does it feel like to interact with the world from inside of yourself? Okay. And if you can play with that, it's a very interesting experience. And for me, it was very eye-opening. It was very eye-opening about how less exhausted I got, for example, when I was talking to people that were hysterical and bawling and like having problems, right? Because it allows you to stay in your own space and to allow them to have their experience and to just be present with them, to just be, okay? And so, that's something I can suggest just because I found it surprisingly helpful. And that wasn't the point of the exercise. It was just something that I noticed about my own experience with it. And when you start to get subtle, you'll notice, what we do. And we're all doing this unconsciously. Okay. We're all going around like grabbing at each other all the time. You go to say something to somebody and you throw yourself out at them. And so what does it feel like to stay centered? This is what it means to stay centered, right? I just don't think we ever really realize what that means. You stay in your own integrity and you have your experience and you allow other people to have their experience. And then we're all okay. It's just a process. We're all going through a process together. I can allow you to have your process without feeling responsible for your process. Okay, does that make sense? And like I said, there's like years of therapy around all of that, probably, at many nuances for all of us. It's a deep sort of thing to work with, but that's a starting place that's pretty safe that you can just play with. What does it mean to mind my own business? To like mind my own energy and stay in here. And that practice, you have to do it regularly to get used to what it feels like, because that's not how we generally operate in the world. Okay. But I can tell you, in my career, now this year's been very different because we're, doing everything on the phone mostly. But, when I'm in oncology, you can imagine that, I'm in a very small room with people, that basically I make cry all day long. Right. And it affects you. It affects you. And so I'm constantly in this growth process of how do I stay present with people and allow them to have their experience without getting totally derailed and emotionally exhausted and sick, all that kind of stuff. And that practice really helped me. And it helped me because it made me understand what I do that is causing me to be exhausted. Okay. It makes me understand this isn't about other people. Like, you can't change what other people do. You can't change what they say to you. You can't change how they're feeling. You can't make them do anything. I'm responsible for myself and the choices that I make. And then within the context of our relationships, then we make choices about how we help each other, whether I can engage with this relationship in a healthy way, or that's a boundary that I acknowledge that I am not capable of dealing with now. So that's been one of the most helpful and interesting experiences for me as far as, engaging with that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just say that that was a really helpful statement that you just said? You can't control what other people say to you or do to you, but you have the choice to, can you engage in that relationship? Is it good for you? Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have to be responsible for our own experiences. It's not about blaming, it's just acknowledging this is how it is. And, this is what my current capacity is. And, how do I engage with the world from the best place that I'm able? And we'll evolve as we go forward. We evolve as we learn about ourselves and learn how to interact with each other in better ways and care about each other in better ways and be kind to each other in better ways more consistently and accept each other. I mean, really, in the end, all of that is just about acceptance because, don't all of us just want to feel like we're okay? We want to feel accepted. Like, you're okay. You don't have to be perfect. You're okay. I accept all of you. Okay. You can't accept all of somebody else if you don't accept all of yourself. I mean, it's, I think, an impossibility. I think there's a limiting belief, right? But yeah, I mean, life is complex and interesting and amazing. And, sometimes just shifting your perspective helps you engage more playfully, like I said, with less, you know, downtrodden seriousness. Okay. All right. So I've talked for a super long time today at all of you guys. You've hung in there pretty good. Our half hour is over and we only got a couple questions in. Does anybody else have anything pressing that you want to bring up? Are you guys all doing okay? Yeah, okay. All right, good. So tonight,
Did you see Cheryl Decker has a question?
No, where? You don't have a question? You do have a question. Okay, hold on. Unmute yourself, Cheryl. You can do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before you started talking about positioning, I call it your light behind the heart.
Yeah.
I had never, ever been guided through something like that. And immediately, for me, that experience was so powerful. I always saw the light in the heart center from the front. And as soon as you gently guided us, take it a little further back, take it a little farther back, a little back. I was like, holy moly, I can't believe. Like all of a sudden, I saw myself sit up more and have more control, not control, just looking at it differently rather than, because I'm that kind of person. When the heart center is in the front, I lean in to the point that is completely exhausting. The work I do, it will exhaust me to the point that by 2:00, I'm pooped. And sometimes I have, 4 or 5 hours more to go. So that helped me tremendously. Just moving that light behind.
Good.
I will
Good.
never
I'm glad.
forget that.
Good. Good. Yeah. And one more thing about that, if you guys can hang in, that particular positioning, okay, that posture, we'll call it, that posture that she guides you through, allows you to, when you have your consciousness or your awareness centered like that, and you are engaging with this, I'm just going to use the same words that I've been using, even though I realize they're a little bit esoteric. Okay. This ground of consciousness or field of consciousness that's surrounding us. Okay. And then you're like a light of consciousness within that. All right. That posture, that mental posture, allows you to let everything that happens move through you. Okay. So things don't, in a sense, sort of stick to you in the same way when you're like that, which is why I think it's helpful for me. But, if you decide to take a workshop with Judith Blackstone, she calls it the realization process. Okay. She talks about that. She talks about learning how to be centered in a field of consciousness where you're connected with the possibility of everything around you. And then you're able to just be present with everything that's happening to you without grabbing it, okay? Or without it sort of sticking to you. So, what she says, which, I think would take practice, is, for example, if you were in this place, someone could be screaming at you and it would just move right through you. Do you know what I mean? And because what do we do if we imagine, what happens if someone's yelling at us? We go, ugh, right? It sticks to us, or we grab onto it kind of. So she describes how, sitting, getting adept at holding this kind of awareness allows us to be present with what's happening and just to allow, okay, to allow. And the reason that that's helpful and effective is it's not that you don't do anything. Okay. That's not what this is about. It's because then we can respond to the world rather than reacting to it. Right? Do you understand? Do you see how that would be helpful? Is, we're responding with intention and with kindness and with, integrity, with wisdom about, how things are. So it better positions us to, be the kind of person that we all want to be. Okay. To be calm and to be content, to be peaceful in the chaos that's going on around us. And then we move towards the fulfillment of our desires, or the fulfillment of our dreams, which is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Okay. So I'm going to write down a list of questions if you want to work through on your journal, some self-reflective exercises that might be helpful for you. And tonight, for the fire ceremony, what we're going to be doing is writing down the things that we want to let go of, and then symbolically letting go of those in a physical sense. So it'll be a little bit, we'll just have to be kind of creative, because you guys weren't necessarily prepared for that. And I know a lot of you are on retreat and you have certain things with you. Usually, if you were at my house and we were doing it together, what we would do is we would make a bonfire. And then you would write down on tiny pieces of paper the limiting beliefs that you're ready to move beyond, okay? That you're ready to allow to move through you and let go of. Experiences or labels that you have for yourself that you're ready to let go of, okay? To open to possibility, okay? The field of possibility. And then what we do is we put those in the fire and let them burn up. And that is sort of a symbolic statement that we're making in the physical world that we're ready to let go of something. So I will guide you through it. Just will be a short little thing where we'll write something down and let it burn away. If you have the ability to go outside and make a little bonfire or something, you could do that. Okay. You could also, if you have a candle and you are able to somehow put that candle somewhere in your house that it's not going to cause a fire when you do this. So maybe like in the bathtub with the fan on in the bathroom. Okay. And use super tiny pieces of paper. So maybe you just put like one word on the paper that represents the whole sentence or something like that. And then you can kind of, let that burn up. If you have a fireplace, it's traditionally a fire ceremony. You can, just do it in your imagination. So if you don't have a candle or you don't feel like you can do that without risking burning yourself or the place that you're living in, then we'll just sort of together imagine that we're doing it, symbolically. But we'll do that at about 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Again, it's optional. So if you want to join, I'll make a Zoom, which will be like this, and we'll just sort of go through the steps together. And I'll also write down kind of a simple fire ceremony of how to do that in case you want to just do it on your own. All right. This is something that I like to do, you know, a couple times a year just to sort of reset, you know, and, you know, kind of just give myself the opportunity to engage with reflecting on, you know, what's old and I'm ready to be done with, and create some space for new things. So, so that's that. All right. One more, Amanda, did you have a question about meditation or something? I see there's a note here. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
Ask from the meditation earlier that Valentina did, if there was like a certain, the thought that came up, for example, and it seemed like there was more that we could do with that, can we go through that session again and intentionally bring that thought up again and work through it a little bit more?
Definitely. The meditation's intention is to pay attention to your mind content and how it has an effect in the body and in the sensations in the body and your breathing. So if you found that the spontaneous thought that you brought during meditation is worth exploring, I would definitely go into it. You have the recording again, and just bring it on purpose, that same thought, and observe what it creates for you. Definitely, yes. This was supposed to be, okay, let's pay attention to what you have no clue what's going on, right? But it can be done with things that you want to bring up and explore what's that causing in my body, because I have no clue of what is causing, and it's still causing it. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, thanks everybody for hanging in. You're doing good. I know it was a lot of sitting. So
and Esther has a question about where to find the articles.
Yeah.
Can you come up, Esther, and let me know if you're able to go to the website and see the menu? And whomever doesn't see a website with the menu, let us know, because some of you have asked where to find this and that. And we are on a private website that you were invited to through the Mighty Networks. The website is called Divine Powerhouse, and you are part of it, Esther, already. And you can access that. If you're on your phone, it works different. I realize that now. Okay. Are you on your phone?
The menu is just in the upper left-hand corner. It's
okay. Is it under topics or?
Yes.
It's under topics. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And then it will say retreat resources, and it will be in there. But I have to make it, so it's not in there yet.
Oh, that's why.
It will be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because I went there, I didn't see anything. So, okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I haven't made it yet.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to try to do that soon. I've got a session that I'm doing for somebody at 7 o'clock. So hopefully it'll be before that Eastern time. Okay. All right. I got a jet. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.